So welcome to chapter 10, and chapter 10 is on interest groups in lobbying. And you're going to learn in this chapter what interest groups are, how influential they are, and potentially the pros and cons of interest groups and where they can lead you if we let them. So let's jump into chapter 10. So, chapter 10 is, as I said, covering just the essence of what interest groups and lobbying are and how they work. And I think you'll find it to be pretty interesting in terms of the whole context of how they're actually structured and what they actually do. Let me move myself off of here if it's possible. Okay, good. All right. So, without further ado, let's explore this a little more in detail. So when you ask what is an interest group? Well, an interest group is basically a group of people with shared ideas, and they organize themselves around the shared or common idea or an interest that they're all interested in, whether it be a political interest, or social interest, or economic interest. This is what an interest group is. And so it's a group of people who have a shared interest in a particular issue. Um, and so with that, they try to influence politics and public policy and laws to serve the interests of their groups, and to make them much more public, and usually to get people to join their groups as well, more people to join their groups. Under the notion of pluralism, the primary notion here is that uh, interest groups try to compete with each other to promote their laws that benefit only their groups or their respective groups. And this is partially where maybe what some of the problems exist, because if you're serving only your interest instead of does your interest necessarily represent the greater good, that's a difficult question to answer sometimes. And that's where things get sort of convoluted. As a matter of fact, political parties are interest groups. That's literally what they are. And yet we give them such great reverence as if there's something more than that. And then you think about it in the terms of political parties, think about their goal. If the goal of the political party is to benefit just their group, then what about the majority of the other group? What do we do there? And I think that's a big issue that never gets really talked about in terms of the potential damaging effects of interest groups. Now, the idea of majoritarianism really is about um, just how public opinion and the results of voting and sort of the mass representation, their impact on democracy in general. So when we talk about the results of voting, you can go back to just 2020 and what happened January 6th and trying to overturn the election. And so you can see what happens when these things spin out of control or develop a life of their own, which tends to have relatively cataclysmic consequences. And by the way, let me just digress for a moment. The idea of public opinion, you have to understand also, is serves the person who controls the media, so that whoever controls social media can control the narrative of what public opinion looks like, because they're feeding to you what they want you to believe about how that situation looks or what that issue looks like, whether it's true or not. And a lot of times, sadly, Americans are duped into believing crazy nonsense sometimes, for lots of different reasons. And it's unfortunate, but that's sort of how human nature is, I think, that we try to believe whatever we see either on TV or in mass media somewhere. We think that it must be true because it shows up in the public somewhere. Now, some of the advantages of interest groups, it is a place where you can share ideas. So if you have let's say your interest group is looking for the common good, whether it be like, let's say, save the whales, right? So I may have my ideas about it, and other people in that group may have different ideas. So we share our ideas and come up with hopefully a common platform to be able to move our ideas forward. It's also part of our natural inclination as human beings to group ourselves. We're group animals typically, for the most part, meaning that we prefer to be with other groups of people who think like us or share common values in some particular area, whatever that area might be. Uh, and then it's also our basic right, as in a democracy, is to be able to to develop and grow and step in or join groups that represent our interest, even if some of them happen to be negative. Now, some of the disadvantages, there are more disadvantages probably than advantages in some ways. And one of them is the fact that the wealthier interest groups tend to have more resources and more power, more political pull with the our representatives in Congress and state legislatures and even local legislators. They give them money to push them to vote for policies and laws or bills rather that represent their interests. So the more money you have, the more influence you have. Sometimes, as I said earlier, they can contradict their interests can contradict the common good. So it may serve the interest of that interest group, whether it be like a political party or some other group, but it may not serve be good for the people, for the common good of the country. And that's where things get a little more complex. Sometimes there's thousands and thousands of interest groups, and so it really gets the waters get very muddied with the number of groups that are out there. They're also not elected. Anybody can join an interest group. So you have, people who are crazy, people who are not crazy, people who are racist, people who are not racist, people who are sexist, people who have all kinds of issues can join. Anybody can join, for the most part. And there are other ones that aren't, where they don't, where you have to be through a certain group. It's like having a private country club, and only certain people can join the country club. Uh, and again, I think the key and the one that stands out to me personally is the fact that it may benefit a few at the cost of many. And that circles back to the contradict the common good. Uh, so, for those who are focused on politics, the interest groups basically focus on elections. They're trying to get people, who share their interest, representatives who are running for office or those who are running for office to represent their interest to run for office, which sometimes again goes against the greater good because they may be serving even just their constituency in their local area, but may not be looking out for the country at large. And that's also a problem when we look at it politically, because parties tend to be sort of generalist in their orientation, and these are specifics and groups with specific interests that are trying to pressure them to vote in their interest. Of course, when we talk about social movements, those are also propelled by interest groups. This simply means that the interest groups usually are behind most of the social movements, and certainly in the last 100 years, you could argue that the movements start, but there were people who are committed to, whether it be to global peace or to even war. And there are people who were charged with moving these things. The women's movement of the 1970s started with an interest group of people who were interested in the issue of women's rights that pushed the movement that happened in the late 60s, early 70s. And then as we see how they've grown over the last 100 years, as government has gotten larger and more bureaucratic, so too have the interest groups and their impact or ability to impact politics and the political outcomes of the country. This also manifests itself through political action committees, which you saw in one of the videos just recently, how you can put money into these political action committees that help benefit a particular candidate and their goal of running for office. But it also influences their behavior and what they decide to vote on, and that whether serve the greater good or serve the interest group. Uh, Again, it helps support campaign costs because you can hide your money. Whether just like in one of the previous chapters, you learned that, like, if I'm an individual, I can only give $2,500 to any particular. If you're running for office, I could give you $2,500. That's all. But through the political action committees, I could give you millions. And I can hide a lot of that money as well. So no one would know that I gave it to you or to your political action committee. Let me clarify that. It goes to your political action committee, which then funnels it to your political campaign. And then we have some of in terms of the action aspects of interest groups, and this is what we call the iron triangle. And the iron triangle really is, as you see here, it's an interdependent relationship between how the legislators, the bureaucracy, and the lobbyists work in a certain political or policy area. So it just shows the relationship of those three of those three aspects. And here's an example of it, how it actually works. So you can see you have bureaucratic agencies, interest groups, and congressional committees are highlighted in bold. And it just shows you the process of how they all work. So if you look at interest groups at the bottom, and then they, by virtue of campaign contributions to congressional committees, the output of that are budgets and jurisdictions that are then funneled to the bureaucratic agencies. And then from the bureaucratic agencies, the contract and regulations then go follow back to the interest groups. So it's a process of how policy making gets done between those three bodies. Um, Now, some is regarding in terms of membership in groups, there's usually three primary benefits. The first one is a material benefit, meaning that the group gets, you might get discounts. So if you're a part of an interest group, they may get group rates for travel, hotels. It could be something like that, or it could be you might get discounted grocery shopping or stores. You probably see a lot of that today as you know when you join certain things, you get group rates on discounts on things. They call that material benefit because you're getting an actual physical benefit. Um, the purpose of benefit is basically the sort of the satisfaction, sort of the psychological aspect. It's sort of the satisfaction of knowing that you're contributing to a cause. So if you believed in, Save the Whales, for example, then by joining that group gives you a sense of purpose and a sense of satisfaction that you are working toward saving whales, for example. And then the solidary benefit is just sort of the benefit of getting a chance to network with other people who have similar interests as yours. So this is what we call solidary benefit. And these are the three primary benefits of being part of a group, as and in conjunction with the notion that we're naturally group animals anyway. So, and again, what makes some groups more powerful than others, of course, is certainly size of membership. It certainly plays into that, like the NRA. The NRA is an interest group, has millions of people that are part of it, which gives it a lot of power. So you have some wealthy members and hardcore dedicated members. All those things make certain interest groups more powerful than others. So those are the three primary areas that dictate how the power of how powerful an interest group happens to be, and also how much power, the influence they have in our congressional system, or I should say legislative system, vis-a-vis Congress and state legislators and local legislators. And then some of the economic interest groups, as you can see here, are business type groups, labor unions, professional associations. These are what we call economic or have economic interest. And so their goal again is to drive and protect either build mechanisms where they can enhance their wealth, their viability, the wealth of their people. So labor unions are always trying to get money for the workers, for example. Sometimes the professional associations also have a ability to influence the economy and the influence in Congress as well. And then the non-economic groups, basically, as they say, as you see here, are public interest groups, groups that have, that focus on issues and ideologies. And then you have government interest groups. And within that, there are sometimes what we call intergovernmental lobbies. And lobbies are really interesting because these are also how interest groups are able to influence the behavior of our legislators. This is how the millions and millions of dollars that are funneled to buy their loyalty or buy their allegiance is where it comes from. This chart here shows you basically who spends the most on lobbying. You can see the U.S. Chamber of Commerce spends over $1 billion on lobbying. American Medical Association spends almost 300 million. General Electric spends almost 300 million. So these are entities that are focused on trying to influence the politicians to enact policies or bills to be able to support what they do. So the pharmaceutical agents, pharmaceutical research, you can see it's about $250 million, et cetera. But this is just a small cut, but you can see how much money is actually being funneled into legislators to control or influence their actions. And there's different types of lobbying. There's grassroots lobbying, which basically you go out and you just hit people up at the grocery stores when they try to get you to sign stuff, for example, out in front of the grocery stores. And then there's support for candidates and parties in political elections. So certain lobbyist groups like the NRA will support one candidate or the other, depending on how they view the impact on who's going to write who's going to try to protect their interest politically. So if the NRA feels, for example, that the Republicans are going to do more for them, then they'll support a Republican in the elections and things like that. So that's how that works. Again, when you look at some of the big donors to political campaigns, this just shows you again, if you follow the money, you can see what how things happen or what who gets taken care of. So ActBlue is at the top there, as you can see. AT&T again, 50 million. American Federation of Workers, employees rather, almost 50 million, et cetera. Realtors. So you can see the people who are basically working to buy influence in the political system. How they go about achieving their goals, basically through litigation, which is through legal precedents, right? They going through the courts. And then also through persuasive campaigns where they use social media and other venues to be able to persuade folks to join their causes or to contribute money to their causes to achieve their goals. And that's it for interest groups. So I will look forward to seeing you in the next chapter. Thanks a lot, you guys.